of rain has already fallen in parts of the state. The U.S. Border Patrol temporarily shut down a primary facility for processing illegal aliens in South Texas following the death of a 16-year-old. Jeff Manasso reports.
The U.S. Border Patrol says a 16-year-old illegal immigrant died after being diagnosed with the flu at its processing center in McAllen, Texas, where we're told a large number of illegals in custody were found Tuesday to be suffering from high fevers. The agency says its focus is providing medical treatment and that illegals apprehended in the Rio Grande Valley will be held at other locations until the situation is resolved. The processing center, a converted warehouse, can hold hundreds of illegal border crossers at a time. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
Some parents in California are upset with the sex education curriculum at their children's schools that could start as early as pre-K. In Claremont, California, Leah Uko from Fox TV affiliate KTTV has more.
The California State Board of Education approved the, quote, health education framework. It gives school teachers guidelines and information to incorporate into their sex education curriculum in junior high and high school, but also for TK through 6th grade at the school district's discretion. Guidelines include talking to kindergartners about gender identity, contraception, LGBTQ relationships, and recognizing signs of abuse.
Parents who are opposed say they're shocked to see the new material since it seems to include detailed information about sexual health. Oregon continues to work on controversial assisted suicide proposals, although time is running out. More from Charlie Butts.
Bills dealing with assisted suicide are in both houses of the Oregon legislature. Lois Anderson heads Oregon Right to Life and tells AFN.
Senate Bill 579, which eliminates the existing 15-day waiting period for anyone that an attending physician determines will likely die within 15 days. So basically allowing same-day assisted suicide.
Anderson says on a positive note, 2 senators did vote against the measure, which now goes to the House. The lower chamber is still working on a bill that would expand assisted suicide so that a doctor or perhaps a relative could pull a switch on a box and administer a lethal dose.
The way that they've set it up is really would allow for a Kevorkian-style suicide machine, which, of course, the person ends up dead, so there's no incentive to investigate whether or not they actually flipped the switch or somebody else did. It's very dangerous.
The key is that any measures not passed out of committee by this Friday will not be moving out to the floor this session, which ends in mid-June. So, Oregon Right to Life continues to urge citizens of the state to contact their elected representatives to vote no. I'm Charlie Butts.
A half-price version of Eli Lilly's popular Humalog insulin is now available. The company promised in March to offer diabetics a more affordable option amid fierce criticism of soaring insulin prices. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Holy Spirit speaks to everybody. The problem is most folks don't listen.
Lonnie Poindexter.
If they do listen, they don't take it to heart or they get fearful or whatever. But when you listen and act upon it, wonderful things happen. And because a man of God heard the voice of God and acted upon it, it blesses me today. And you as well for listening in.
Lion Chasers. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I respect the courts. I respect Congress. I respect right here where we're standing. But what they've done is abuse. This is investigation number 4 of the same thing. Probably 5.
For some reason, maybe it was lack of confidence on his part, that he really couldn't match the greatness of the challenge that we have. Wasn't really respectful of the reason of the Congress and the White House working together.
Instead of walking in happily into a meeting, I walk in to look at people that had just said that I was doing a cover-up. I don't do cover-ups.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Well, the president is right. He doesn't do cover-ups, and I think he's just had it. This is, I guess, what we've moved into now is I've had it, you can stuff it, and let's move on. And I think it's absolutely justified. Welcome to the program. It's Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right, here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You can find out more about everything we're doing here at afr.net, urbanfamilytalk.com, and of course, stacyontheright.com. So let's see. How do we get, like, if there's so much news today, and I guess that's like every day. Well, first of all, we are going to be getting into fantastic content today. The political backlash, charter schools empowering inner city children to escape poverty and failing public schools, the debt problem that I kind of teased it yesterday and we ran out of time. So we're going to talk about the penny plan from Senator Rand Paul. We're going to have part 2 of Don't Give Up from yesterday, and this report that's out that shows that married couples who are regular practitioners of faith, so faith walk, they're basically Christians, people who have a strong faith walk, actually have better marriages. Who would have thunk it? So we're going to go over that report, and then we're going to take your calls, and that's all this hour. You're the guest. We'll take your calls at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037, and that's going to be really, you're going to be the guest for this first hour of the show. So right now, let's talk about the encouragement that we were getting into yesterday, and I want to kind of finish that up today. And I was really, like, this is one of those encouragements that you get into it, and it just, there's so much to it. So yesterday we left off talking about sowing and reaping, the part of not giving up, where you acknowledge that when you're gossiping, you'll be reaping gossip about you. When you're lifting people up and encouraging them, you'll find that others come and lift you up and encourage you. When you plant, you get corn back, not tomatoes. We talked about how sowing and reaping follows after its own kind. So you can't sow seeds of division and, pour out strife into other people's lives and expect your life to be strife-free and for there to be, no attacks, et cetera, et cetera. You can also expect reaping to be proportionate to sowing. So in 2 Corinthians 9:6, it says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. So you can't say in your garden, you can't put in one seed for a pea plant and harvest 300 bushels. It just doesn't work that way. Now, there are some plants that kind of replicate themselves and they spread, and they grow. But generally speaking, if you want a huge harvest, you have to plant a lot of seed. If you want to reap the right things, the correct things, the things that uplift and help you to grow and are beneficial to you, you have to sow towards the right stuff. You have to sow towards beneficial things, and you have to sow abundantly. So one example that I've heard given many times, it's one of my favorites, and I like to share it with our kids is, so you spend what? An hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe possibly 3 hours in church on Sundays. And you can't expect that one infusion of time with the Lord and gathering together with the saints. It's necessary. It's needed. It's required. You should do it. But if that's the only time you have for God is that 1 2-hour session a week, then you can't expect to be growing by leaps and bounds in your faith spiritually. It just doesn't happen that way. There are 168 hours in a week. If you're giving 1, 2, or 3 hours a week in devotion to, your faith, that's not going to cut it. That's the basic, entry point. You start from there. You have to, if you want a rich harvest spiritually, you have to sow spiritually in abundance. So it's more than that. It's an everyday faith walk. And I know, and I agree with it completely. You want to have your devotions in the morning or right before bed. If you're a morning person or if you're a night person, you do it based on what works best for you. But you want to devote that time to the Lord. But it's not just, okay, I've done my 15 minutes of devotion this morning and that's it for the day. It's a continual conversation and relationship that you're growing and pouring into to receive, obviously growth, sanctification, and answered prayer, and the abundance, which is joy in spite of the circumstances, etc. And so if you spend much time on spiritual matters, you reap much growth in godliness. Basically, you get out whatever you put in. And that's the bare minimum of what you get out. You basic level, you get out what you put in, but you're going to get more out than you put in. That my experience has been whatever effort I make, God multiplies that and I get back far more than what I've put in. So you have to be willing to endure and struggle at doing good things and right things for longer than just the very immediate short term. It's a commitment. You know you're going to reap. You know that. James 5:7-8 says, "Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near." The Lord's coming is near. Your reward will come in due time. So that's God's time, not ours. And you'll reap the rewards for doing good when the time is right. And some of those rewards could be spiritual growth in the time of need, being there to witness souls coming to Christ, the hands of others lifted in praise and worship to God. Maybe, and those others, it might be your children, it might be your spouse or a family member, someone that you've been praying for them. God controls the harvest. He decides when it's ready. He decides how much the harvest will be. It's not ours to schedule. We can't dictate it. It might be a short time. It might be a long time before it comes, but it will come. So don't stop. Don't slack off. Don't allow the enemy to come in and steal your joy in doing right and doing what God has ordained for you to do, whatever that is, wherever you find your ministry, which is where you are. Don't give up and become weary in well-doing. So I hope that's encouraging. I hope that it's because I'm certainly not preaching at you or trying to make it seem as if I've got this all under control. This is just as much for me as it is for you. But it's what we're called to do, not to give up, to have faith and to be strong in the Lord, knowing that He is not just willing and able, but that He will do what He's promised us. He does not fail. So that's the encouragement, the part 2 of Don't Give Up for today. And the original verse was Galatians 6:7-10. And I hope you'll check that out and maybe meditate on it. And I hope it's a blessing to you. So now, there's this report on religious couples having happier lives. But I also promised yesterday, we were talking about immigration, and there was we had someone reach out and say that we didn't actually give the details of what the president's immigration reform plan was. So I want to go to some slides here if you're watching online on the live stream. For our huge listening audience, I'm going over this info. I want to make sure we have it in the podcast. You can always share it with a friend. You can find the YouTube at Stacy on the Right, and you can just clip out this section to share with someone if you want of the program discussing this. So here we go. This is straight from the White House, and what they're talking about is the president's recently announced immigration proposal, which, if we're just looking at it in the natural, this can't happen because this is what they proposed before. But if we're kingdom-minded and we know that God answers prayer and that He's able to do all things, we know we have to understand what the plan is and pray that the Lord would deliver the results. What we want to do is have faith that God will answer our prayers in this area, because it's very discouraging right now. The way things look, that meeting that the president had with Nancy Pelosi today, not exactly the most encouraging thing, but God is able to right every wrong. He's able to make all things new. And so we got to trust Him to take care of the situation as well. So he's proposing, the president is, the most pro-immigrant, pro-American immigration plan in the history of this country. And according to the guidelines that we have here, it's not developed by politicians. It's designed to have significant input from our law enforcement professionals, which is so important. So here's the rundown of the basic kind of the structure around this plan. The president wants to create a permanent self-sustaining border security trust fund for law enforcement, financed with fees collected at the border crossings themselves. The president wants to restore integrity to America's broken asylum process by expediting relief for legitimate asylum seekers and sending those who abuse the system back home. He also wants to modernize the dysfunctional legal immigration process by increasing the number of legal immigrants selected based on skill and merit from 12% to 57%. Now, this is a part of the thing that I'm not sure, like, I almost feel like, do I support this? I mean, I support lawful immigration, but this hurts American workers. When we say we're going to get the majority of our talent from overseas, it hurts American workers. So I'm not so sure if I'm fully on board with that. Prioritizing the immediate family of new immigrants, spouses, and children by moving them to the front of the line over distant relatives who use family claims as a tool to get ahead in the queue. So another way of saying chain migration would be really changed drastically. And then lastly, establishing a standard universal points-based criteria for admission to the United States, no matter where you're born or who you are related to. So the president actually is asserting here that this plan is pro-America and pro-immigrant, and that those are synonyms, not opposites, and that illegal immigration is what hurts everyone. A random, unfair entry process hurts everyone. Underfunded law enforcement hurts everyone. The only ones opposed to a safer, stronger immigration system are the special interests profiting off of the status quo. So I hope that that is a good kind of starting point. You can always go to whitehouse.gov and find more information on the plan, more details. And then, of course, I hope to have someone on from the White House to discuss this. Obviously, we had Cassie Smedley on last week, I believe, to discuss it. And we kind of just basically opened the topic up. But I'd love to have a White House staffer join us. And so we'll see what we can do about that. We're not always able to get who we want to come on the show, by the way. Some of these people are hotly in demand and very difficult to book. But we'll see what we can do about that. So that's the immigration plan. And anything's possible. I'm going to stay away from being negative and, well, it can't happen because of Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is just one person. She's the head of one part of the Democrats, and she is not all powerful. She's pretty good at blocking stuff, but she can't block God. So we'll see what happens. Let's continue to pray over this as we pray for the president and his administration and his family when we sit down for our meals. If you're participating in that, thank you so much and God bless. Let's continue on with that, and also, praying for the immigration system and having it righted and rectified. So this report about religious couples having happier marriages, the study actually examines egalitarianism and religion in 21st century relationships. And this is kind of fascinating. It's a joint project of the Institute for Family Studies and the Wheatley Institution, and it uses data from 2 surveys of respondents in 11 countries: Argentina, Australia, Chile, Canada, Colombia, France, Ireland, Mexico, Peru, the United Kingdom, and America. The authors set out to examine how the now standard bromide that progressive secular social values lead to happier marriages. Now, I can tell you that's not true. I have, anecdotally speaking, seen that, the things that can hurt marriages can hit families that are church-going and families that aren't church-going. But we saw a rash of divorces among our non-church-going friends when our kids, it was like the year they turned 8 and 7. And it went on for about 5 years. People just getting divorced. We'll get more into this. We'll unpack this a little bit further when we get back. I'm Stacy Washington. This is American Family Radio.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your healthcare. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MediShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Some years ago, Karen and I went through a time of discouragement. It was a stretch in our lives where we really needed the love and encouragement of trusted friends, and God in His grace gave us what we needed. A pastor friend and his dear wife came alongside us and gave us a listening ear. They showered us with encouragement and love. Then in recent years, God gave us the joy and privilege of ministering to that very couple and encouraging them in their time of need. We will never forget what they did for us. In 2 Samuel chapter 19, David models for us what we ought to do for those who have helped us in the past. David and his men were in the wilderness running from his son Absalom. While he was out there in the wilderness, an 80-year-old man by the name of Barzillai came alongside and brought them supplies and gave them refreshment and much-needed encouragement. Now David was back in Jerusalem and things were simmering down. Listen to what David did. Verse 39. All the people crossed over to Jordan, and the king crossed too. The king then kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his place. There are some things we need to keep in mind based on this encounter. Number one, honor those who have helped you, especially the elderly. Number two, do all that you can to show your appreciation. Please say thank you to people. Then number three, you will need help in the future. Don't forget about those who have helped you in the past. You might need those same folks tomorrow. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Remember those who have been a blessing in your life. Find out how you can bless and encourage them. You will reap a harvest of joy.
Crawford Loritz is senior pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org. livingalegacy.org.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. Check us out at stacyontheright.com, urbanfamilytalk.com, and afr.net. Also, our news site. Don't forget, onenewsnow.com. That's us. Check it out. Share the content that you find there. That's another great way to support the ministry. All right, so let's go to the phones. If you want to join us today, you're the guest. It's Hump Day. So Stacy on the Right Show, guest day, audience guest day, listener day, whatever you want to call it. We should come up with something cute and snazzy for it, and then have, call it that all the time. We'll work on that. All right. The call lines are open at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. All right. Brian in Arkansas. Hey, Brian, thanks for calling the show today.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing a great job. Probably got one of the best ones on the radio at the moment. But anyway, Trump, the way they're treating him, obviously is, mischaracterizing him in so many different ways. I'm really hoping that this first 4 years is kind of a learning a ground for him, and then the next 4 years he really takes the gloves off and really just starts. I hate to say getting nasty, but I mean we've got to start giving as good as we get, and I think he's been doing a fantastic job. I think he's been holding back a little bit. And I hope that these next 4 years, he just gives them all that they can handle and then some.
Brian, thank you. Because that's how I feel. I really thought after the midterm, no matter what happened, he would be doing that. But I think that the issue that we have is that the Republicans, enough of them, like the support he needs in the Senate, he doesn't have it. I think he would be gloves off, swinging for the fences if he just had more support in the Senate where we have control, but he doesn't. And then with Nancy Pelosi controlling the House, it's not what I thought it would be. But thank you for calling the show, and that that'll be my prayer, that the president is unleashed. I really would like him to be unleashed now, to be unleashed, and to kind of say, you know what, I'm going to go for it as hard as I can, because I want to do what's right for the American people. And I made promises, and I'm going to do it this way because winning in 2020 is predicated upon me achieving my goals. And he's done so many great things so far, but on immigration, we are not getting what we we're not getting what we paid for with our votes. And I know that's not wholly his fault, but he's got to be willing to say, Mitch McConnell, you work for me, dude. You work for the American people, but you're under me. I'm in the executive. You're in the Senate. We're co-equal, but you're not telling me that I can't shut the border down to get Mexico to act right. So John in Texas, hey, thanks for calling the show today. I can't hear him. John?
Hello?
Hey,
Hello?
Thanks for calling the show today.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Very well, man. I've been listening to the show. I enjoy it. Just wanted to comment about the immigration proposal by the president.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, I totally understand what you said about, the issue of the point system and all that, but that is what Canada uses, and I think it's good.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the issue of the illegal immigrants. That is not good. Myself, I'm an immigrant from Nigeria. I came illegally, white citizen, and I understand that. I totally support
I don't know if you're outside, but we're getting a lot of wind while you're talking. If you could stay in one spot and have the phone to the side. Yes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. I said, personally, I'm an immigrant also, and I understand the fact that, people want to come in illegally, and that's not right, so we're, but the point system, I think it's a good one.
Yes.
It will give people opportunities to come in, and the jobs are there, I think so,
Mm-hmm. I agree. And you know what? So thank you for coming lawfully, and thank you for being here. And also for being, so when you come in lawfully, and you probably had quite a road to get here and be here in this country. And for you, the people who come in illegally, they're basically jumping the line and making things more expensive for people who are coming lawfully. And you mentioned the point system in Canada. I love the fact that you brought that up, John. That is what we need here. And it's not that I'm saying points is the way to go, but some kind of way to categorize prospective immigrants so that we get a wide variety of people, and that people who are really the best for our country get in, like yourself, lawfully, and are able to join us. Thank you, John in Texas. I appreciate you calling in, and thanks for being here. So that's what I love. See, I could hear a little bit of his accent, being that he's an immigrant, and he's calling in and saying, we need a system. We do need a functioning system, right? So it's not about bigotry or xenophobia or any of that stuff. It's about acknowledging that we have a country and we want what's best. So it doesn't mean every single person who comes into the country is a criminal. No. It doesn't mean every illegal alien is a criminal, other than they've broken our immigration law, which does make them a criminal. But beyond that, being criminally minded, it's no guarantee. But when you're here unlawfully and you're already breaking that law, you do have a more like where are the fences around you to stop you from doing other things if you came here for just economic reasons. And the other part is that if you're not here lawfully, you haven't been given that information about the Constitution and the founding of this country. You have not been told that we want you to be an American. That is really important. We want people who come here to want to be Americans. It doesn't mean you leave behind your old culture and you never, ever have any of your history or any of that. But it means that you're primarily an American. You may be, like he said, he's from Nigeria, I think, Nigerian American, but you are primarily an American. And then you have your culture and your customs and your traditions, and then you learn some American cultures and traditions and then kind of incorporate it in your American experience. I don't think there's anything wrong with us saying we want people to do that. We have a couple more calls. If you want to join us, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Kevin in Arkansas. Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining the show today.
Well, thank you for taking my call, Stacy.
Sure.
What I really wanted to speak about was, we're looking at superficial things as far as like the border. We're looking at budgets. It's the ground game is what I see going on, especially in the Democratic Party. How do you overcome a system that you want to change? If you can't do it lawfully, then you do it unlawfully. Trying to collapse a system for instance, immigration. Look at the toll that it's taking upon we the people of what we put in taxes and how it's being spent. And the Democrats are hell-bent to collapse the system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whenever you overwhelm something, then once it collapses, now you can make an end run around what you want, what your agenda is. And that's what I see it doing. They have an agenda, and it's not the will of the people.
So well put, Kevin. So you're right. And I think what you're saying is the immigration and these other issues, the budget, they're serious, but they're not. It's the whole package of collapsing the system that enables them to make these inroads. And I really, truly believe that, because sometimes when a politician or a leader will make a statement about something, I think sometimes it can be that they're speaking from a place where there's a bit of a prophetic nature to it. And when Donald Trump said that he wanted to come in and drain the swamp, well, that was the first time I'd heard that reference for the United States government, the federal government. It was my first time kind of like, drain the swamp. And so I was like, a lot of people were excited by it, but I kind of thought, what can that mean? And over the past 2.5 years, we've really seen him systematically taking on portions of the federal government, and the pushback has been extreme. I mean, can you imagine back in the George Bush years or the Bill Clinton years, the Republicans launching a fake investigation into a candidate who then won the presidency and trying to use that investigation to remove him from office? Can you imagine the Republicans doing that? One of the things that's happened with the Republicans, and I know it's been written about a ton, but I truly believe it's factual, is that because of what happened with Richard Nixon and the lies that he told and the way he stepped down, he wasn't impeached, it kind of put the Republican Party on a straight and narrow path where I always joke around about the sweater vests and all that stuff, but Republicans wanted to overcome that image of having a president who had to resign from office because he did, criminal things. And so because of that, they always err on the side of, we want to be lawful. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't had any Republicans make mistakes or be corrupt or anything, but they have much more to prove. They have it's as if the Republican Party has since that time just really been focused on this can never be us again. On the Democratic side, because, obviously they had Bill Clinton, he was impeached, but Bill Clinton was for the kind of misbehavior that you have in your private life that the Republicans said, the presidency is a moral office and you can't have this. But it started off as the Watergate thing, right? So the Republicans were investigating him. They did smell a rat. They knew he had, white water and all that other stuff in his past that he'd gotten away with. And they didn't want him to be able to get away with anything as the president. But this is different. The president has been exonerated, yet we still see basically an overwhelming of our immigration system, the refusal to pass a budget or work on balancing the budget and reducing our yearly deficit of $1 trillion. And then this it's even Nancy Pelosi today, the interchange between the president and Nancy Pelosi today, where she actually said he was engaged in a cover-up. I don't really believe, and y'all know I have no love for Nancy Pelosi before y'all start emailing me and saying, don't say nice things about Nancy Pelosi. This isn't anything nice. But I don't actually believe she wants to impeach the president. She said as much. But I also don't believe she's fully in control of the Democrats anymore. Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Occasional Cortex, or whatever her next nickname is, Tlaib, in a very smaller way, she's like a sidekick to their little superhero team of evil. But Nancy's no longer the queen bee. Last time she was Speaker of the House, she wielded the gavel with expeditious force. She was an extreme entity that no Democrat would ever cross. Now she's in charge on paper. She gets to hold the gavel, but her caucus, the Progressive Caucus, they actually didn't want her. They actually were people that had to be kind of brought along kicking and screaming to her leadership. And they're working to get rid of her. And part of what they're doing is they're screaming about impeachment, and they're browbeating her. They're putting her in the same position that we've seen our two rhino senators in so many times. Lisa Murkowski is the one I think of most often, who is bullied by the senatorial women. The female senators on the Democratic side bully her, and they make her vote with them. Some of it she's fine with, but the more extreme positions, she votes with them because I think she's actually afraid of them. It's like that situation where you see the mean girls and they have one of the sidekicks who's not fully a mean girl, but she helps execute all of their dastardly plans because she doesn't want to be on their bad side. And it's interesting to watch Nancy Pelosi go from being this super confident red coat, aviator sunglass wearing, prima donna, and, she's queen of the world. She's more powerful than the presidency. It's interesting to watch her be degraded and pushed down, pushed around, really. And I don't have any sympathy for her. These are the people that she's, decided these are my people. And this is what happens. It's a cautionary tale for all of us. When you see the folks who you're like, oh, they're kind of scary. Not scary like, scary good, but because, but scary bad. Like you see them and you see the way they operate and you think, wow, that's kind of ruthless. If you throw in your lot with the ruthless people, don't be surprised when they decide, okay, now it's your turn. Yield. And if you don't yield, then they start working on you. And that's what we're watching. The very seeds that Nancy Pelosi has sown into her political party and into this country in her decades in Congress, the actions she has deliberately taken to overthrow the Christian moral foundation that used to be the basis for K through 12 education and higher education in this country, Nancy Pelosi has been instrumental in tearing it down with her own hands. She has turned away from wisdom and wise counsel. She has pushed out anyone who would disagree with her radical kind of bent. And the further to the left she's moved, the harder it has been for her to control those around her. And it's because they're more radical than she is. She's rough, but she's not as rough as the gang she's thrown in with. And now, and I think it's super unfortunate, she's about to find out just how strong the seeds are that she's sown, just how rough the crew that she's thrown in with, how rough they really are. They're going to force her to do some kind of impeachment proceedings. They're not going to give it up. And doing that is going to be, just my opinion, y'all, that's what this show is. I think it's going to be what cost them the election. Because enough Americans have said they don't want impeachment. I think the number is somewhere in the 60% range. They don't want impeachment for this to be this is not what they want to do. And I'm not saying that because I want Democrats to win. I don't want them to win. I believe that the Democratic Party as it stands right now, the party apparatus, I'm not talking about regular people who are voting with them, who are trying their best to, find their way through in this new socialist, Marxist, commie Democratic Party. I'm talking about the leadership, the hardcore activists, and the people you see up all the time holding the pink signs and wearing the anatomical suits and saying the horrible things and chanting Hail Satan. Those people, those activists and those who are funding them and those who are in leadership in the Senate and in the House and all over this country working for the DNC and the Democrats, those people, they're nowhere close to being in a biblical way about what they're doing in this country. There's nothing in the Bible that you can find, even if you're going to cherry pick verses and make them mean whatever you want. You can't find justification for the current actions that the Democrats are foisting on America. The immigration, abortion, the moral stances, the attacks on marriage, the attacks on the male-female dichotomy and gender. There's no biblical justification for it. Stacy Washington, be right back.
Have you ever found yourself so embarrassed in a situation that you couldn't even look a person in the eye? One day, I was in the drive-thru of a famous fast food restaurant, and I was giving my order to whom I thought was a man, but turned out to be a woman. Oh my goodness. I found that out because I said yes, sir, and she quickly corrected me. I was so embarrassed, I couldn't even finish the order, so I drove off. That was a true story of fear and embarrassment. Deuteronomy chapter 31 verse 6 says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified because of them, for the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you." My brothers and sisters, do not operate as I did and drive away due to fear creeping in. Know that the Spirit of the living God lives in you, and with Him, He can bring about that courage that you didn't even realize was already in you. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victoria Hollyfield. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
When my mother passed away, I started running the streets and dealing drugs. But when I came to Teen Challenge, people saw past my rap sheet. And with their support, I started a whole new life, drug-free.
If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, Adults in Teen Challenge can help. There are centers across the country, and you can find the one nearest you at 855-END-ADDICTION or at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Stand by. The BSAC radio show spotlights Christian rap artists.
But never try to put me on the pedestal. The Lord is working on me. I'm getting better still.
Hear in-depth interviews and news about upcoming releases.
What's your motivation? Jesus, He's a motivation.
BSAC is the Biblically Sound Artist Coalition. Don't miss the BSAC radio show. Saturdays from 10 a.m. to noon Central on Urban Family Talk.
Media Minute with Howard Kurtz.
Have we become a nation of news addicts in the Trump era, and is that unhealthy? Guardian columnist Oliver Berkman writes that the news, for many of us, is no longer one aspect of the backdrop of our lives, but the main drama. He says, well, you might say the news is simply so crazy right now, yet the news has often been crazy. What's different now? It's available on our phones 24/7. He says that raging on Facebook, for example, or sharing posts feels like doing something. That might be an illusion, but it is a powerful one. And you see this in your own lives. You go to work, the office, you talk to people at the park, at the dry cleaners. Everybody seems to be talking politics. Everybody's checking their phones. Everybody often seems angry. This is the way that journalists experience the world, but until recently, ordinary civilians did not. Maybe we all need to take more breaks from nonstop news consumption. And maybe, at times, that includes me. With your Media Minute, Howie Kurtz, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Excellent points about how the Democrats on the committee are more interested in public relations than fact-finding. And the very fact that they had this televised hearing, it wasn't really a hearing, it was kind of a joint speech-making, suggests that what the Democrats want to do is provide the illusion of an impeachment process without actually opening up one, because they know if they do open up one, it could be a political backlash against them at the polls.
Hey, welcome back to the program. We're still taking calls and really enjoying being with you today. And thank you for making your home at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Stacy Washington, glad to be with you right now. Let's go back to the phones. By the way, if you want to join us, 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Leroy in Kansas. Hey, Leroy, thanks for calling the show.
Oh, thank you. But like I was telling the gentleman earlier, the Democrats, they're trying to destroy this country. Mm-hmm. And they need to get themselves together and go back to the way it was and change their ways instead of doing all the crooked stuff and not working with Trump. God put Trump in there. Mm-hmm. Whether they believe it or not, if they don't, they're going to find out they're going to be in a heck of a mess because God's not going to let it keep on. And them killing babies, so God's liable to put the blood on their hands for killing all them babies.
I agree. In fact, Leroy, I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the fruit of that is, the rise in school shootings, the fact that we've had terrorism on our home soil. That has never been something Americans have had to deal with. We've always seen terrorism over there, never here. Now we have it in our country. We have it happening. We have over 1,100 investigations into terrorism going on right now with the FBI. You're so right. And I just want to point out, this isn't about, because I don't think you, Leroy, I don't think you are saying the Republican Party is Christian and the Democrats are not. You're saying their actions, the things they're voting for, the things they're foisting on America, forcing us to participate in, like this open border and the sex trafficking and abortion on taxpayer funded, that is what is going to bring the judgment, not just because they're one political party or the other.
Right. The Republicans are going to have to answer for the same thing, and so is independents and Democrats. They're all, anybody that's for taking the lives of little children.
Yeah.
The blood shouldn't, God should just let the blood be on their hands, because that's bad.
Yeah, it is. And you're right. But one thing we can be assured of is that God knows not only our hearts, but the actions that we've taken. And if we're supporting it, then the blood is on our hands. If we're opposed to it and we're fighting it, then it's not. It's pretty easy. You can be for it or you can be against it, but you can't sit in the middle. Jasmine, thank you for calling the show today.
Hi, thank you, Stacy. Thank you so much for taking my call. I really appreciate you. I love what you do. I've started to listen to you when I love it. But one thing I wanted to comment was, my husband came to the United States legally. We did the wait process, and it's not fair for people to jump the line and the United States of America that aren't for them. We need to have a system put in place where they can access, these government programs, because it's not fair for people, for American citizens and, people who do things the right way. We shouldn't get punished and, kind of get an easy, trying to think the right word, but, it's just not fair. It's not right for Americans to have to do that.
I agree, Jasmine. Thank you for calling the show. And I think what you're expressing is what's happened to a lot of Americans. And actually, I have a couple of friends who their husbands are like yours, lawful immigrants. And they have talked about how lengthy the process is and how often the husband will have to travel back to the home country to do something and then come back to the United States, and how hard it is for them to get a job. But we make it so easy for illegal aliens. They just come on in and they get work in our black market and they start getting government services and they immediately get pregnant and have an anchor baby so they can get government benefits, so they can move into, Section 8 housing or get a housing voucher. They're doing all this while Jasmine's husband and so many other, husbands, wives, what have you, that want to come into the country, they're having just the worst time. I mean, and $50,000, $60,000 is the process. It doesn't always cost that much, but it can be, that expensive. And for people who want to be Americans, they're happy to pay. They work it out. But how is it fair that someone from Bangladesh just flies to Mexico and crosses the border illegally and they're here for 20 years? How's that fair? It's not. It's not fair. So Doris in Arkansas. Hey, Doris. Thanks for calling the show today.
Oh, thank you for accepting my call.
Sure.
And excuse my voice. I'm recuperating. Basically, I'm not understanding all the laws and everything involved in this, but I think that a moratorium on immigration should be put in effect immediately until the mess is straightened out.
I agree.
If they close the border, except for trade and legals, I know that's very involved, but it can be done. Then the next thing is that they need to get all the people that's here illegally rounded up somehow or other and ship them back. It's just ruining our economy and our way of living and everything else. So, if I was the president, I'd find a way to do it. And I know he's got the Congress to mess with, but the laws sure need to be redone and totally redone. So
I agree, and God's blessings and Godspeed on your recuperation and recovery, Doris. Thank you, and your comment is spot on. What exactly? So we won't have any avocados for a while. I think we're going to survive. Like this, it's just the fruit du jour. We do not have to have avocados at every meal like what we're doing right now. When you go to a restaurant, it's every meal, it's an avocado. I mean, come on. Call lines are still open for you. 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Right now, while we are just still in this subject matter, and I did have one more thing I wanted to share about this, and we're going to get into charter schools empowering inner city children, and all of that, but I wanted to get into this, I gave you some of it. The study that I mentioned by the Institute for Family Studies, the authors were Bradford Wilcox, Jason Carroll, and Lori DeRose, and they wrote about it in the New York Times. And they talked about the people who are stuck in the middle between having a religious or egalitarian marriage, and that people who were somewhere in between were consistently worse off. But they looked at roughly 5,000 couples, and they based the kind of the questions and the answers and the results covered the frequency of religious attendance, and then the couples were classified as either secular, religious, or mixed. And the survey data shows that highly religious couples report higher rates of marital and sexual satisfaction than their mixed or secular peers. And this goes right back to Scripture, where God says, if you obey, you will be blessed. But not only that, he talks about the marriage bond replicating the Godhead, and we know that there is satisfaction and joy in the Godhead, and we can have this same experience in our marriages by doing them the way that God has ordained it. And then there's all of the community and the resources that come with being in a religious community. When you're plugged in at church, you can do Bible studies, you can do marriage retreats, you can be around other couples who encourage you and pray for you and pray with you and come alongside you if there should be a difficulty. So we still have plenty of time for calls. Let's go back to the phones. Hey, James, thanks for calling the show today.
Thank you for taking my call, Miss Stacy.
Sure.
I am a ex-military combat veteran.
Thank you for your service.
Okay. My wife, thank you, ma'am. My wife come from a foreign country. I fought for this country. I put my life on the line on it. To bring my wife here as an American citizen, it cost me thousands of dollars to have her background checked, have her high school records, elementary school records, and everything translated to English. How does the Democrats think it's fair that they want to turn around and let all the illegal criminals that come across here illegally off in the country, give them free things, and make an American citizen pay to bring somebody to this country that they have fallen in love with? As a military veteran, I take that as an insult.
It is totally an insult. And so you're in a situation that I grew up on military bases in Germany. And so I'd say maybe a third of my friends were families like yours, where one was active duty service member and then the other one she was either German, French, I mean, you name it, Thai, Vietnamese, the wife. And sometimes it was the wife was on active duty. It was the husband, but mostly it was the husband, and the wife was an immigrant. And they would, have to go through this process. They would get married in the home country, wherever the service member was stationed, and then have to go through the process of, like you said, background checks. And people forget all these costs that you had to pay. And you were serving our country while this was going on. But it was still the same hardship for you as it would be for anybody else. Meanwhile, illegals are just pouring in. They're not getting married so they can come here. They're just coming here and having a baby. And it's crazy. I just can't believe people don't see that as a total insult to us. So let's go to, let's go to John in California. Hey, John, thanks for calling the show today.
Hi, Stacy. I love your show. I'm pro-life. I know you're pro-life, and I'm also a strong Christian. I wanted the women's point of view on incest and rape on this new abortion issue that we're struggling with.
Okay, so first off, the position that I hold as a pro-life person it's biblical, and it's not based on wanting to punish anyone or viewing a baby that is born as a result of rape as a punishment, or a baby that's born as a result of incest as punishment. Obviously, those are things that should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, the rape and the incest. But that being said, that's already laws that have been broken, and they need to be prosecuted. The baby is the innocent victim as well. they are a victim as much as the mother is, because the way that they were created has basically put them at odds with a huge segment of our society that wants to see them killed. Now, I always go back to, I could explain it to ad nauseum, but instead I prefer to go to Ryan Baumberger, who he himself is the product of a rape. His mother was raped by his father. He does not know his mother or his father because when he was born, he was given up for adoption into a family, a couple that adopted, like most of his siblings are adopted, and they're a huge family. And he talks about how because his mother made that choice not to punish him because of what his father did, he's alive and he's married and they have children. Not only that, but he got to experience growing up in an adopted family that wanted him and loved him and brought him up as a God-fearing Christian man. And so that woman who experienced that horrible rape sowed a seed into life that is now reverberating throughout our country because he's a national speaker and he's blessed so many. Like I've been so blessed by him, listening to him speak, listening to him talk about his family, his wife and his kids, listening to him talk about growing up in that adoptive home that took him as a baby and raised him. And I can't stress it enough that the answer to some person, some violent, depraved individual raping a woman is not to kill the baby that results. And there are plenty of women who are now coming forward and talking about how their baby is a result of a rape, but they don't hate the baby. They love the baby. And the baby has now grown up and given them grandkids. And, so that's the answer. This is the problem with sin and depravity. We can never have an answer for every single sin that happens that is consequence-free or doesn't involve someone having to kind of go outside of what would be the normal reaction and stepping out in faith. And so for people who don't understand what I've just expressed, it's not about your feelings towards the person who did the rape or the incest. It's about the baby being innocent. And if you are against the depravity, the subjugation, the horror of the rape or the incest that happened to the woman, you should definitely be against further victimizing another separate human being who is completely innocent by ripping them apart limb from limb and destroying them for simply coming into existence, which they had no control over. I hope people hear what I just said from my heart and not from a position of me trying to rain down some kind of judgment from on high, or that I just only care about fetuses. I don't care about women. Obviously, that's not true. And I know I don't have to prove that to you. I don't have to tell you what I do in that area. God knows, and He is my judge. And He is the one that I live to please, not you. I love the listeners, but I'm here for what God told me to do. All right. God bless you from the heartland. I'm Stacy Washington.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. President Trump hosted congressional Democrats for talks at the White House today, but the meeting went south very quickly. John Decker has more.
President Trump at an impromptu press conference in the Rose Garden explaining why he walked out of a planned meeting with congressional Democrats to discuss infrastructure spending.
This meeting was set up a number of days ago at 11 o'clock. All of a sudden I hear last night they're going to have a meeting right before this meeting to talk about the I word.
Pelosi earlier accused the president of a cover-up when talking with her House colleagues about the possibility of pursuing impeachment. The president said he's unwilling to do any deal on infrastructure as long as the congressional investigations of him continue. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
Independent Senator Bernie Sanders and many Democrats continue to push a Medicare for All plan, something they say would solve a lot of problems in today's health care system by giving everyone the same coverage and reducing administrative expenses, which drive up the cost of health care. Still, Kara Jones of Independent Women's Forum says Medicare for All's rich benefits leapfrog plans in other nations.
They like to look at Canada as one of the examples for what we would like our system to look like. But it's important to understand that Canada has one of the most narrow benefit packages in the industrialized world. When you look at other industrialized nations who provide single-payer or universal health care coverage to their citizens, Canada doesn't cover vision and dental care. It doesn't cover outpatient prescriptions. It doesn't cover long-term care or mental health. And these are all some things that Senator Bernie Sanders is looking to cover in Medicare for All. So the real question is, how are we going to pay for all of this?
The aftermath of violent storms that ripped across the southern and central plains is deadly. Jeff Manasso reports.
The Oklahoma Highway Patrol says a woman apparently drowned northeast of Oklahoma City after driving around a barricade into flash floodwaters.
Please do not drive through standing or swift water. It's for your safety, and it's for the safety of our first responders.
Oklahoma Emergency Management's Mark Galler, dozens of counties under a state of emergency, with flooding also plaguing much of Kansas and Missouri following dozens of violent storms that officials now also say killed a 74-year-old woman in southwest Iowa. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The Postal Service is ready to deliver without a driver. Brett Larson explains.
A 2-week test underway in Phoenix and Dallas will make use of autonomous trucks from a San Diego startup called Too Simple. A safety driver and an engineer will be on board to keep an eye on the process and jump in should something go wrong. But the trucks won't be going door to door to drop off your mail. Instead, they'll make nearly half a dozen round trips between Phoenix and Dallas, about a 2,100-mile journey that'll have the autonomous vehicles on major interstates in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. The length of travel also have the trucks going beyond the ability of us humans, which is the goal. It comes at a time when the American trucking associations say there is a coming shortage of nearly 200,000 drivers in 2024. Too Simple's chief product officer, Chuck Price, telling Reuters that autonomous long-haul trucks have an advantage over cars since they stick to interstates, reducing mapping needs and safety concerns sharing the road with pedestrians and cyclists. Brett Larson, Fox News.
And in a split decision, the National Labor Relations Board has ruled in favor of Volkswagen in a setback for unionization efforts at its Chattanooga, Tennessee plant. United Auto Workers won representation of maintenance workers there in 2015, but Volkswagen has never bargained with the union. Instead, the company challenged union certification, arguing the bargaining unit needed to include all hourly workers. After years of back and forth, the union in April asked the NLRB to allow a vote for a new bargaining unit, this time including all hourly workers. The NLRB dismissed the petition today based on a technicality. UAW still was representing the smaller unit when it sought to represent the new, larger unit.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, the sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do. In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I respect the courts. I respect Congress. I respect right here where we're standing. But what they've done is abuse. This is investigation number 4 of the same thing. Probably 5.
for some reason, maybe it was lack of confidence on his part, that he really couldn't match the greatness of the challenge that we have. Wasn't really respectful of the reason of the Congress and the White House working together.
Instead of walking in happily into a meeting, I walk in to look at people that had just said that I was doing a cover-up. I don't do cover-ups.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to the program. So we have a lot of content to get to, but I want to go straight to the phones. I love it when we have a lot of callers and we can share. And so let's go first to James in Indiana. Hey, James, thanks for calling the show and thanks for holding over from the break.
Hello, Stacy. This is James from Indiana, Army veteran.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. You too. Thank you. I just want to make a comment on history that as far as revolution, I think the Democrats are following that path where they're just like the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, where the founders of the revolution eventually get consumed by the young revolutionaries because they're not going far enough extreme left. So I think Biden and Pelosi and so forth are potentially in danger of being consumed by their own revolution.
Yeah. The historical, you're referencing history on this is so appropriate. And James, one of the things that happens if you don't know your history, then you have no way of seeing the train when it's bearing down on you. And Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi are standing there checking themselves for a selfie while the train that they set into motion it's literally within hundreds of yards of them. And they're not going to get out of the way. They're going to get run down by their own. That's what's so funny about this. It would be, to me, really appropriate if it was the Republicans who were coming in and riding in on a line and saying, look, you're advocating for socialism and Americans don't want this. But it's not. It's their radical leftist agenda that's actually coming back to bite them. The bed they've made, they're now going to have to sleep in it. And it's going to be like the rough kind of sleep, like the sleep you don't get up from, because Nancy Pelosi is not going to survive what she set into motion 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when she started toying with these radical ideas. She's not going to be able to get away from this. Let's go to Kenny in Oklahoma. Hey, Kenny, thanks for calling the show today.
Hello, Stacy. I praise God in the Lord Jesus Christ. I thank you for your wonderful programs. Like all evangelicals, true evangelicals, like all true Christians, I'm 100% against the Democratic Party because it's totally evil. But Stacy, if I'm not mistaken, when President Trump was asked about the homosexual mayor in Indiana running for president, President Trump praised that homosexual and he praised that lifestyle. What a sickening thing. What a slap into the face of the evangelicals that has supported President Trump. It really hurts. It simply tells us that in the future, and God forbid that we get a Democratic president, but it also tells me that in the future, whether 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years from now, it's going to be up to us. We'll see no protection from a Republican president. And I know President Trump has done some things to promote religious freedom. We're thankful for it. But in the future, we cannot look for support and protection from the Republican Party. President Trump is showing that he's not born again, or he would not have praised the homosexual mayor from Indiana. We as individuals, our families, our churches, we had better pray fervently, Stacy, that we be found faithful. We better get more serious. Once again today, I heard once again about the transgender perversion movement in California, trying to get to the little children, 4 years old, 5 years old. I guess it's already happening, and they're pushing it more fervently. I tell you, I believe, Stacy, God will strike California with a major earthquake for indoctrinating these precious little children with that perversion. We as Christians, we better pray more fervently, Stacy. Christians had better be more careful about what they watch on television, the ungodly DVDs.
I agree. Music. Absolutely. And Kenny, thank you so much for calling the show today. So I just want to, just for my own part, and Kenny is welcome to his opinion, but I don't know what God's judgment is going to be on the state of California for their lawlessness. In fact, I tend to believe, obviously I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know what God is going to do. He's merciful and full of grace towards us, and he doesn't give us what we deserve. But he also said, touch not my anointed and don't lead the children astray. So I will just say, I think some of what we're already seeing in California, I was just reading this morning, I think it was, in the wee hours of the morning, Insomniacs are us. I was reading about how Los Angeles has a persistent problem with this trash piles. They'll pile trash up as tall as a building and leave it there to rot and stink. And so they have huge rats the size of cats, running around carrying typhoid. And the typhoid is actually transmitted to other people. You think to yourself, well, I just won't touch any rats. Well, the fleas that are on the rats are actually what are going on to human beings and giving them typhoid. And typhoid symptoms, which can be like a severe flu. Now, if you've ever had the flu, I know what you're thinking. The flu is severe. Now, imagine a severe case of the flu and all of that, what that involves. So Los Angeles now has a new pile of trash that's, as tall as a building. And the sanitation department of Los Angeles says they're going to take care of it, but they haven't. And so they're now seeing typhoid cases and typhus cases. These are third world conditions, and they're happening in California. You also have the wildfires, the devastation of that. And I know we have listeners in the Californian audience, and we have Christians who listen to and support this ministry who live in California. And I pray for your, safety and continued ability to maintain your businesses and your homes there. But California is the leading edge of what the Democrats want to do to the entire country. Garbage, feces in the streets, children being taught about sex and having their innocence stolen from them. That is what's going on out there. But it's not just California. It's New York. Some of this stuff is happening in Florida and Texas. You see it happening in, Seattle, so Washington State. Seattle's not a state, but Seattle, Washington, and Oregon. You see these hardcore leftist type ideas being foisted upon people. And all I have to agree with him. We got to be praying, and we have to be literally, it has to be a commitment that we're making for praying for these situations, and then activating after you've prayed, activating and saying, now what do I do? And I would be remiss not to address the initial comment that he made in his call about President Trump's comments about Buttigieg, or whatever his last name is, because I refuse to call him Mayor Pete and kind of give validity to this idea that he's a harmless individual. He is the very iteration of all of the things that people, like myself, the people who speak into the national discourse, have been saying. What Democrats want is to completely invalidate the Christian experience in this country, and a same-sex married president would do that. If you think Bill Clinton was damaging to marriage and faith and religion and the morals of this country, imagine what a same-sex marriage proponent who's married to a man, quote unquote, would do to all of those things in this country. We're talking about the transgendered men beating our girls in sports and not having a safe place to go to the restroom in public as a woman, or, with children. Imagine what comes next after that. So, we don't want the judgment. We've seen what judgment looks like in the Bible. We don't want that. So, call lines are still open for you. 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. Hey, Warren, thanks for calling the show today.
Hello, Stacy.
Hi.
So I'm a military brat. I was born in Germany. I grew up in the country of Turkey, and then I actually joined the military myself, the U.S. Navy, and spent 4 tours over in Europe. Now, when I go over and visit in other countries, like when I was in Turkey, I brought it upon myself to actually learn the language, learn the culture, learn everything about that area, and believe it or not, there's some beautiful Christian history there in Turkey, especially where I grew up at Izmir, like the amphitheater of Ephesus. But, when the people come here, and I see that they've been here many, many years, they don't learn our language. Like you were saying earlier, the point that I was really trying to make was they're not trying to become an American. Mm-hmm. I think that an immigration process to bring them here to the United States. And I love all peoples, don't get me wrong. But like the Marine said earlier, I'm trying to bring a person from the Philippines to here, and it's costing me, a bunch of money to bring this young lady and her little child here to the United States. And yet these immigrants are just crossing the borders. They have no intention of becoming an American. They have no intention of assimilating with us. And I guess that's what my biggest issue is. If they were trying to be here and trying to add to our society and to bring something constructive, man, I'm all for it, but just go about it legally instead of this illegal process.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you for your service, Warren, and blessings on your process for bringing bringing your immigration goals to a conclusion. Hopefully, it will be expeditious and of minimal cost. I know that's even saying that, I know how hard this is for you. But thank you for calling the show and for what you've done for our country. I just think it's heartbreaking to hear people like Warren and others who've called into the show today who are trying to do things right, lawfully, and experiencing hardships, while others, and I know it's not easy to come up to make the 1,400-mile trek to go through Mexico and come to America, but if it's that hard, how is it that we now have 1% of the population of Guatemala now within the borders of the United States? 1% of their population is now here in America. I don't get it. I don't get what we're watching. I don't get what we're seeing. I don't get this. This does not make sense to me. Also, I forgot to mention, we are going to have Andrew Langer, who's the president of the Institute for Liberty. He's going to be with us next segment. We have time for one more call. Tommy in Ohio. Hey, Tommy, thanks for holding on.
All right, thank you, Stacy. I just wanted to ask a couple questions about truth. Aren't the laws that the government make are supposed to be true, all about truth? How can they make a law that is a total lie? We know that by fact that it's a total lie that you cannot change from a man to a woman, or vice versa. And how does the media get by with lying to the public every day on that television? How is the public supposed to know the truth if the media is telling them a bunch of lies all day long? Oh my God, I'm been upset about this all day. I thought I'd give you a buzz.
Thanks, Tommy. I appreciate your call. And so I think it's one of those things where we've seen this kind of corruption at the company level. We've seen it at local level in our governments. I'm broadcasting from Missouri, where we had our governor step down because of things that he, extramarital affair and some weird, like, he was texting from this phone and it wasn't it was a taxpayer funded phone or something like that, and doing fundraising business from it. And so we see corruption at all levels. And what we're seeing on the floor of the House, what you're describing about this, it's like a fixation. Have you ever met someone who was obsessed with something to the point where they're almost incoherent, where you can't discuss the weather or what you had for lunch or any other topic? They're obsessed with a subject and they can only talk about that subject. And that is where the Democrats are with this transgender thing. You would think transgenders were like 80% of the population and they were being oppressed and beaten in the streets. But the fact is they're I think it's like 1.8%. And these people, even if they are 1.8%, even if there's 1 million of them or 2 million or 3 million of them, it doesn't mean we should allow them to dictate social policy just because they've got a mental illness and they refuse to take normal steps to deal with it. That's the problem that we're experiencing. And so I want to encourage people, so this is totally, I hear the music. That, I don't have a good answer for it other than depraved, wicked, human beings in need of a savior at every level. If you're watching the show on live stream, please share the show. If you are listening on one of our terrestrial radio stations, please tell someone else to tune in the way that you tune in, whether it's on a radio station, the live stream, or the app, the American Family app, the Urban Family app. Share us. We appreciate you. Be right back.
The Ministry of Preborn meets abortion-minded women right where they are. When a young mom sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to keep her baby.
And I got to hear and see my baby for the first time. Hearing the heartbeat made me cry. and it was certain that I was going to keep my baby forever.
This mom chose life for her baby.
She's been such a joy. Her name even means rebirth and sort of being raised up from the ashes. I now see my daughter, and I cannot imagine my life without my happy, lovely, joyful, smart baby, and I'm so grateful.
Preborn runs and leads Christian pregnancy centers all over the country. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Sometime in the near future, America will go over the entitlement cliff. That is the argument of Dr. Merrill Matthews, co-author of the book On the Edge, America Faces the Entitlement Cliff. He was on the Point of View radio talk show recently to discuss the problem and possible solutions. The first part of his book explains why entitlement programs fail. To put it simply, they are not actuarially sound. But the problem is even greater than that. He also shows how the cost of entitlement programs always exceeds projections. He details the expansion of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. The second section projects how America will fall off the entitlement cliff. Not only does he provide projections for Social Security, but also for the impending pension crisis, the welfare debacle, and the health care debacle. This is true of both private sector pensions as well as for public sector pensions. He also includes sections on stepping back from the cliff. He deals, for example, with the fact that we have different types of safety nets in society that result in different outcomes. We do have examples in other countries of how to construct a sustainable safety net, and I wish some members of Congress would read the sections on principles of a sustainable safety net and embracing actuarial principles. There are solutions to the financial challenges we face with entitlements, but we also need to elect a Congress, politicians who actually want to solve some of the problems created decades ago with these government programs. So far, most members of Congress, unfortunately, want to ignore the fact that sometime in the future we may go over the entitlement cliff. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program. Check us out at afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com. Right now, we're working on getting our guests together, but I did promise you this penny plan by Rand Paul, so I'd love to get to that audio right now. It's number 2. He's describing our debt problem first before he sets up the plan.
We are spending money and borrowing it at over $1 million every minute. How much does that mean to every American family? Over $170,000 per American family is owed on this national debt. What's a total? $22 trillion. In fact, interest on the debt now is over $200 billion. What does that mean? It means it crowds out all other spending. So anything else the government could be spending on, it's limited because of all the interest that we're spending it on. Whose fault is it? Oh, I don't know. Let's say both parties, both the Republicans and the Democrats. What do we do about it? I'd say, let's try looking at spending. That's why we're going to look next at my plan to balance the budget, the penny plan.
So he has all these pennies spread out in front of him, and I put this up on the Facebook page if you want to check it out. It's a video, and it's not long, and it's very informative, as most of his offerings are. And so Rand Paul is basically, he's giving the opportunity for the government to be responsible and to repair the situation that we're in by just making a tiny change. So we all know how hard it is to, they always compare the federal budget to the Titanic or a huge cruise liner. It's hard to make a fast adjustment in the water. You have to see what's going on way in advance so you can begin to turn and get those rudders and turn that big ship, quickly. And big budgets are not easily maneuverable from one extreme to another. He's not suggesting an extreme shift. He's suggesting actually the opposite. just 1% change. But I'm going to let him describe it because it's so good. Listen carefully to what he's proposing. It's number 3.
So how would we fix it? What if Republicans woke up one day, Democrats woke up, and we actually had some principles and people said, we're going to actually cut spending? Would you have to cut half of the budget? Would you have to get rid of all of the spending? No, you know what you could do? We've talked about it for years. If you got rid of 1%, you got rid of this little stack of pennies, which represents 1% of the budget, for years that would have actually balanced the budget. But guess what? Every year it gets a little bit harder because nobody ever does anything around here. Nobody ever cuts any spending. Neither party's any good at this. So now what does it take to balance the budget? Still only 2 stacks. So what would that mean? Government would still spend 98% of what they spent last year. If you talk to most people in government, they think there's at least that much waste in government. So you would leave all of this remaining spending. 98% of spending would still go on. You cut 2% and the budget actually will balance in less than 5 years. We have to have the courage to do it. We have to have the principle to do it. And frankly, neither party has it. So call your representatives, call your senators, call your congressmen, call the president. Tell them we ought to balance the budget and balance the budget now.
All right. I agree with him that we should call and ask our senators to adopt this plan because it is so easy to get done. This is one of those ones where you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't even have to understand budgets completely to the level that Rand Paul does. All you have to do is be willing to admit that borrowing $1 trillion a year above what we bring in, when we bring in a record amount of taxes every single year, that is wrong, and that it is it's a prescription for destruction of our of our society, of our government, of our country. He's right. But, I agree with him a lot. Like, he's a kind of brilliant guy. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome my friend, Andrew Langer, to the program. Andrew is the president of the Institute for Liberty. He's a contributor to the American Spectator and townhall.com. All around fun guy, too. We had dinner when it was like an industry dinner that we attended when I was at CPAC this year. So it was great to get to chat with him and catch up. Andrew, thanks for coming on today.
I have been so excited to do your show. I was when it got booked, I just got this warm fuzzy feeling so happy to be here.
Well, you've got to come on more often. I don't know why you basically are rationing yourself out like once every I don't know how many years. You can come on, you can totally join us.
Whenever you want me on, I am always happy to come on.
We will get you back on shortly. How about that? We'll make it a point to do that. Okay, well let's talk about this Trump pardon. Oregon ranchers have a lawsuit. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, listen, I mean, we're tying together a bunch of different things here, and then the idea being that property rights, even in the Trump era, are still very much under siege, whether it's land property rights or intellectual property rights. And in this case, we've got a couple of things that are going on. Folks remember the whole, Bundy Ranch and the Malheur Wildlife Refuge, and a bunch of ranchers out in Oregon were essentially not being able to do their livelihood under the Obama administration. There was a whole big brouhaha. A bunch of them went arrested. A bunch of them got imprisoned. Trump pardoned a bunch of them, and now two of the ranchers, the Hammonds, they are trying to get their lives back together. They're trying to start ranching again, and the environmentalists who can't let sleeping dogs lie have turned around and challenged the permitting process under which these guys got their permits. It is a situation in which, we're at a point in America where the economy is booming, and yet some people just can't leave well enough alone. They want to make sure that there are folks who can't take part of the American dream.
So what is it with every story nowadays has to do with somebody saying you can't play with us, you can't participate, some drama like that? It's like an epidemic we're experiencing.
Well, it's funny. I don't want to give any spoilers for the Game of Thrones finale for those who haven't seen it. But there is some really interesting verbiage in there about sort of folks who want to remake the world in their image and will not let anybody stay in their way. It's essentially this old Marxist idea that if you stand in the way of their vision of progress, you will become grist for the mill. And if we know anything about the last really century of history in this regard, it's that a lot of people get ground under for the sake of the utopian visions of the progressive left. And as my father is fond of saying, Stacy, there are many roads to utopia, all, however, must traverse the surface of the earth.
Well, and there are many roads perhaps to utopia, but utopia is not a destination that we've ever seen any human being in the history of human beings ever attain. It may be a destination, but it's one in which perhaps there are unicorns and, maybe there are flying pigs, and in that universe or wherever it's located, I am my goal weight, and I never, ever eat dessert. And I also have never tempted by foods. And there's all kinds of magical stuff going on there. I have 1,000 pairs of cowgirl boots, and and my husband doesn't have a problem with it. The grass is always mowed there. This is a place I wish I could get to, but it simply does not exist. There is no utopia for us to get to.
And that's exactly it. And anybody who is trying to sell you on this vision is really talking about trying to sell you on their maintenance of power. And that's part of the reason why, just to sort of bring it back to what we've been talking about, which is this issue of property rights. That's why we're tying these issues of land property rights in with intellectual property rights, because there's a situation that's happening in Oregon and in Arizona and in North Carolina and in a handful of other states where you've got certain parties, in this case it's state auto dealers, who are trying to use their power in a very cronyist way to change laws regarding private property rights and regarding contracting. Imagine this, Stacy. Imagine that you are a landowner, and you have somebody who leases a portion of your land, and you have very specific codicils in that contract for how that land gets leased. And the person comes to you and says, well, we want to do X, Y, and Z more, and you say no. You say that's not what we've agreed to in the contract. And this person then goes to the legislature and tries to essentially rewrite the contract through legislation. This is what is happening with the auto dealers and some computer system owners in these states. And we tie it all together. Property rights are property rights are property rights, whether they're property rights in land or they're property rights in intellectual ideas.
Wow. So part of this story that you're sharing here is about these ranchers convicted under the anti-terrorism law, and they had to serve 5 years in prison. And this is because they set fires. They burned 140 acres of federal land, but this was after they had grazing permits that they lost. And so they were upset, obviously, over the federal government basically pulling their business out from under them. And there's no justification for setting fires, but they also had to pay a $400,000 fine. And so what you're talking about is something that we see a lot of people like Stossel talks about this a lot on his program, and others highlight the government corruption and this idea that government workers have that they can do anything to you. And even if you fight back in a way that is illegal, you get punished, but they never do. They feel a lot of government control. I even saw a piece this morning, I didn't get a chance to read it yet, about government regulations that are being written. These are rules and regulations that are written by bureaucrats who are never elected, and they never have any accountability. And there are so many of them that they've taken over huge sectors of the public space where you're in a field of regulations that you can't get out of, depending on what industry you work in or what you're trying to do, that you have to go through the federal government to accomplish. Oh, no. Okay, we lost him. Wow, that was a pretty good question I just asked. Oh, no. Well, so the piece that he wrote, or let me make sure that I'm not saying that he wrote it and he didn't. This is by Tim Pierce, who is an energy reporter for the Daily Caller Foundation, the Daily Caller News Foundation, is talking about President Trump issuing this full pardon for the Hammonds in July of 2018, springing them from a prison sentence that many saw as unfair for the crime. And what Andrew was talking about is just this whole idea that we're going to have, property, that our property rights are being infringed upon, that so much of what's happening with consumer privacy and privacy rights and property rights is tied to the government. We have Andrew back. Hey, Andrew.
So it's really interesting. When I was working on small business lobbying for the National Federation of Independent Business, I spent a lot of time thinking about this issue of bureaucrats, and it's a huge problem, right? Unelected people with a massive amount of power, And this idea of, Henry Silverglade wrote a book called 3 Felonies a Day, which essentially proposes the idea that the average American commits 3 very serious crimes every day. I had this idea in terms of getting bureaucrats to better understand this, and it was an idea it gained a little bit of traction during the Bush years. That is part and parcel of any bureaucrat's sort of annual training regimen, is that they have to spend some time walking in the footsteps of your average small business owner. And the idea was, because most of these bureaucrats, they have no idea about the breadth of federal regulations. They know about their own little parochial universe. Very small cross-section of what's going on. And the idea was, take an hour of every year, give them some descriptive information about a small business, have them pretend to be a small business owner in that particular industry, and they have an hour to figure out all of the regulations that business needs to comply with. And it was my idea, it was my thesis that if they just spend some time really understanding just how confusing, how labyrinthine, how enormous the regulatory state was for these small business owners, it might give them a better perspective in terms of their governance.
So are they doing that or what?
Well, no, of course not. No, listen, these great, I'm going to say it's a great idea because it's mine. These great ideas, they always, especially the simplest ones, they never really go anywhere. I had gotten some traction with the Bush folks, but it really didn't pick up. And then, of course, Barack Obama was president, and they doubled the size of the regulatory state in 8 years. So this is where these things go. But on the other hand, you've now reminded me that maybe this is a suggestion that I ought to raise to our good friends and colleagues over at the White House.
Well, I think that while you're raising this with the friends at the White House, make sure and also share with them my cell phone number, which you have, because I have some ideas too. And I think your idea would work. I think it's a fantastic idea. I have some ideas that I think would be just so beneficial and integral to the president. But getting in touch with people over there is kind of hard. So if you have an in, get in there, and then don't forget to drag the rest of us along.
I will absolutely do that.
Well, thank you for coming on today and for kind of outlining this issue. I have the story that you sent over. I just tweeted it out. If anybody wants to read it, it's up at the Daily Signal, I believe. And this consumer privacy and property rights issue is one that we should be concerned about. And I really appreciate you tackling it and continuing to keep it at the fore, Andrew.
Anytime, and I look forward to coming back at some point.
All right, perfect. That was Andrew Langer, president of the Institute for Liberty and a contributor to the American Spectator and townhall.com. And I love it when we have people, doing just good policy type work and keeping the rights of Americans at the forefront. For the criticism that we've had to level at the president for his comments about Buttigieg's marriage, I think some of what we see out of the president on that issue comes from his focus is not, it's religious liberty, but it's not tackling the same-sex marriage issue because of Obergefell. I think he would much rather change the composition of the Supreme Court and do that than tackle the issue. And also because his daughter and son-in-law, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, they are very pro same-sex marriage. And so it's like a family thing where part of the family's for one thing and part of it's for another. And so to avoid unnecessary fights, and because I don't believe the president cares very much about what happens with same-sex marriage because it has been affirmed by the Supreme Court. I don't think he's necessarily a huge fan of it, but he has been in this kind of middle zone for years, ever since he was on The Apprentice. Back then, things were much less PC, and he's made comments back when he was on TV back then, but I can't excuse his giving validation to Buttigieg's, relationship, but I tend to see it from the perspective of, I never had a president who was in office that I agreed with on every single thing. And so on that particular issue, I wish the president was more in line with the way I view it and the way that I speak about it. But you take the good with the bad. And, so I don't condone that. But I do think it's important to note that from our last interview there with Andrew, the president has done a huge service to us by reducing the regulatory state that Obama grew. So good and bad. We'll be right back.
What or who motivates you to live and do life? Whether it's the motivation of your business or being healthy and fit, many times the why behind many individuals' determination is because of their children or grandchildren or even a spouse. Their primary why is because of a fallible being instead of Jesus. I know you're probably saying victory. I'm sure Jesus is a reason too, but Jesus should be the only reason for our whys in life. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 10, starting at verse 37, if you love your father, mother, son, or daughter more than him, then you are not worthy of being his. But if we give up our life for him, we will find life in him. It is only because of him we can do the things he has enabled us to do. Have your why be because of the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross for you. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory Holyfield. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, friends. There's a new show in town on Urban Family Talk, nightly, 7 p.m. Central. Join me, C.L. Bryant, as we build the bridge to conversation throughout our great nation, the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. Nightly, the C.L. Bryant Show over Urban Family Talk, 7 p.m.
It's time for truth to be unveiled. It's time to get back to God with Pastor Dexter Sanders on Urban Family Talk. Awakening and empowering everyday people to impact the world. Discovering who we are and whose we are by the Word of God. Join Pastor D each weekday at 4 o'clock Central on Urban Family Talk. And let's get back to God.
America's talking to Fox News.
Seattle is home to corporate giants like Amazon, Microsoft, and Starbucks, but it's also home to the homeless in large numbers. The people of Seattle react.
We definitely need to do a lot more to help people out of drugs, booze, whatever chemical things are causing them problems. It's tough, but we have to summon the empathy.
I've seen heroin deals go down in my backyard. I've seen them heating up the heroin in a spoon in my backyard.
We have rising property crime rates. We have the rising number of people on the streets, rising opioid addictions. And the city of Seattle and the political leadership, the problems are getting worse and people are really starting to get fed up.
There's a big homeless problem and it's only gotten worse. There is virtually no affordable housing. Amazon is a huge part. They've taken over parts of the city. And if they're going to do that, then they should be helping people that live in the city, not just their employees.
America's talking to Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
The sponsor of the bill in this very religious and conservative state, a Democrat.
Our view is that the correct moral response to sexual assault is not to execute the unborn baby who's done no wrong.
Doesn't this run the risk of traumatizing a rape victim twice?
You know, we have got an obligation, I believe, to speak up for those who can't speak for themselves.
The governor, another Democrat, says he's ready to sign it.
Tonight in Louisiana, the Democratic governor stands ready to buck his party and sign a bill that would make abortions illegal once a heartbeat is detected, before many women know they're pregnant.
Hey, welcome back to the program. And that was an ABC-NBC mashup of coverage of this Louisiana Democrat governor is helping to advance this pro-life law that makes abortion much more difficult to get in the state of Louisiana. And they're really upset about it because he's a Democrat. And, you can't have any differing opinions as a Democrat. Now, fully guilty over here of saying that Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins don't represent Republican ideals because they're constantly voting for abortion. And so the news media, which is supposed to be the fourth estate, and they're supposed to be standing up and presenting the news with an unbiased, unfiltered, straight news type of perspective, they can't help but allow their little bloody fangs to come hanging out when they're talking about abortion. They're so for it, they can't even see that their news reporting should be neutral. They should simply report that this Democrat, who happens to be the governor of Louisiana, supports this legislation because he's a man of faith and whatever other reasoning he's given. It shouldn't be that, well, our opinion is that he's wrong about it. Who cares what your opinion is, news person? If you want to share your opinion, get out of hard news and get into opinion presentations. Do a radio show, a podcast, get on a program that is opinion. We all know the difference. We know the difference between the news programs and the opinion programs. Pick one. I think it's absolutely crazy that this is the situation that we find ourselves in, that it's just over and over and over again that they just keep on saying, well, if you're a Democrat, you can't be pro-life. Well, if you're a Republican, you can't be pro-abortion. But look how much they love when Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins toe the line for them. One of the things that they were so happy with, they hated Susan Collins' speech, but she made sure to reiterate in her speech that she was going to support Judge Kavanaugh going to the Supreme Court. She said she was voting for him because he told her that he respected precedent. And that in her mind means he would never vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. So she was fine with voting for him. Again, her credentials as a Republican hinge on the fact that she's a female with female anatomy, and for her, that means she has to support abortion. But this guy, who's much closer to his constituents than a senator, and I'm talking about their behavior, not their actual positioning under the Constitution. I mean, behaviorally speaking, a governor is much closer to his constituents simply because you can actually get to your governor. The senators can just sequester themselves in Washington, D.C., and you can call and burn down the phone lines and email and write paper letters. You can go to their home office in the district in your state and still get ignored. But the governor eventually has to kind of pony up and answer, because you can actually visit him in his office right in your state. It's not as hard to get to him. So, and they have to pay attention to more of their constituents because there's only one governor. There are 2 senators for every state. So, it just, again, I'm so, it's so upsetting that they can't hide their disdain for the pro-life position. And they're morally wrong. So it would be different if there was no moral center to abortion. It was just kind of a matter of preference. If it wasn't about ending a life, and then you could hold either position without being morally wrong. And then they, but it's not that. One side is morally wrong, on the wrong side of not just history, but on the wrong side of what the Bible tells us is permissible, what God condones, what he opposes. And still we see these people continually reaching out, working as hard as they can to promote the unbiblical, ungodly, immoral position. I'm done. I'm done with that. Okay. So I talked about, actually the title of today's show is, it is actually blocking online data collection. And this is, speaking of senators, from the junior senator from the great state of Missouri, Josh Hawley. Senator Hawley has proposed a bill that would give users the ability to block data collection with one click. Now, this to me is where he's kind of delineating himself as being someone who's on the side of privacy and freedom for Americans. And he's saying the tech issue, that's going to be a signature issue for me. So he has this new bill, and it's specifically geared towards blocking internet companies like Google and Facebook from collecting any data beyond what is necessary for the specific online service that's offered. He has actually focused a considerable amount of attention on data collection in his first months as a lawmaker, and he wants to give individuals the ability to join something he calls a do not track list with a single click in their browser settings. He says companies have gotten incredibly rich off of collecting data from individuals who have not consented. And I totally agree with that. It never ceases to amaze me. The other day we were talking about something. I don't remember what room we were in. I just remember having the conversation about buying this item. After we had the conversation, I had not searched for it online. I hadn't, in other words, this wasn't something that I'd already been looking for. It was a conversation. It began to be advertised to me on websites that I visited after I had the conversation. Now, I no longer have the Facebook app on my phone, but I do have Instagram. And unless you're the kind of person who every time you close out your Instagram, like if you close out of it, that you automatically click, like double click and swipe it off, then it's always running in the background. And they keep saying they can't listen to your conversations. But this keeps happening where we talk about something and then all of a sudden I'm getting ads for it. So the quote from Senator Hawley is, big tech companies collect incredible amounts of deeply personal private data from people without giving them the option to meaningfully consent. They have gotten incredibly rich by employing creepy surveillance tactics on their users, but too often the extent of this data extraction is only known after a tech company irresponsibly handles the data and leaks it all over the internet. The American people didn't sign up for this, so I'm introducing this legislation to finally give them control over their information online. Now, there are options for opting out of tracking currently, but Hawley says they've proven inadequate. So Google has actually admitted to Senator Hawley that they track a user's location throughout the day, even if the location history is off. Facebook has admitted that they collect data on people that don't even have an account. So the people in your life who don't have Facebook accounts, they track their data too. They use you to do it. So the list is comparable to the do not call list, which we have here in Missouri, and it's fantastic to have it. It blocks companies from making marketing calls to members of the do not call list. This list would prohibit companies from using data to profile anyone who activates the do not track option, and it would impose strict penalties on any company caught violating the terms of the legislation. The bill would also force these tech giants to disclose the option to users and ban them from discriminating against users who opt not to be tracked. Now, this legislative proposal was originally spurned by the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing in March. Hawley was there sparring with Google representatives over the company's tracking of individuals. He says, and this was back in March, the quote from him, "You don't allow consumers to stop your tracking of them. You tell them that you do. You would anticipate that they do. A consumer would have a reasonable expectation based on what you've told them that they're not being tracked, but in fact, you're still tracking them." Hawley went on to say to these, Google representatives and Facebook representatives, Americans haven't signed up for this. They think that the products you're offering them are free, but they're not free. They think that they can opt out of the tracking that you're performing, but they can't. So I'm really grateful that he's doing this, because I don't think some of the older legislators on Capitol Hill, they're not really tech savvy, which is fine. They're strong on other issues, and with legislators, we don't need everyone to be strong on every issue. We need enough of them to be strong on issues that they can present legislation and effectively explain it, and then the others can come on board. And I think that's what this kind of represents, and I'm glad to see it. I want to see more of this type of meaningful, actual, like this is something that actually impacts multiple tens of millions of Americans, and it would bring these social media giants back down to a scale that is representative to where they should be. They shouldn't be all powerful, overarching giants within our society that are outside of the norms and rules that the rest of us have to operate by. If they say, click here to opt out of tracking, or decide, type here that you're going to, not have your location data tracked, click this thing and close it, or what have you. Go to your settings, go to options, go to this, click, end location tracking. You should be able to do that and then know, okay, I've ended it. And if I want to turn it back on, I go back in and I turn it back on. It shouldn't be that they give you that and it's basically a ruse. It's just meant for you to think you've turned it off, when in reality, you have not. You've done nothing but a little exercise in futility to make you feel good. It's to make you feel good, not to actually do anything. So yeah, I totally disagree with that. So I did mention also, because we are getting close to the end of the show, but I want to cover this, the charter schools empowering inner city children to escape failing public schools. So this one, this flies in the face of what the Democrats say, that public money shouldn't go to charter schools. And one of the Democratic presidential candidates has already said, was it Kamala Harris? Said she wants to end charter schools. I'll double check and make sure that's the quote from her. But one of them said they want to basically outlaw public funding of charter schools, for-profit charter schools. So Butler College Prep is a top-rated charter school on the south side of Chicago, and the parents love it. The families who are there love this school. The founder and principal, his name is Christopher Goins. He built his school community by intentionally hiring teachers from historically black colleges so students would have relatable role models. Now, obviously the south side of Chicago is mostly black. So he says if the students don't love the school and enjoy learning, then they're not going to learn. And it goes back to what research states, noting the importance of a tailor-made education. So he tries to create within the school this family-like environment, a place that understands who we are and appreciates who we are. And the kids are responding to that, and they're performing. So he's doing this to release kids who are trapped in zip codes that have horrible schools. And the parents are compelled, because they live in, on this street in this zip code, to send their kids to a government school that's really not performing, or it's unaccredited, or what have you. So he says these charter schools have safety, innovative curricula, unique missions, and an opportunity to impact specific communities and tailor their programs to those communities. And data shows that charter schools impact student achievement most among low-income and academically struggling students. So this is a model that works in rural areas. It can work in suburban areas that are not, affluent. It can also work in inner city environments. So the question for me is always, how can we get students the education that fits their needs, that in doing so will get them results proficient or advanced for every subject at every grade level, ensuring that these kids can escape poverty. Because a good K through 12 education that prepares you for your next step, whether it's college, vocational training, technical school, the military, or going into your first job and apprenticing, that kind of an education means you don't have to worry about these kids getting drawn into gang environments or drug abuse or teen pregnancy. These kids are much more ready for the future when they come out of an educational institution that has prepared them. Now, obviously, as I said yesterday, that three-legged stool, the parents, you have to be in that mix. But if you're stuck socioeconomically in an area where the schools are failing, charter schools can be that solution. Instead of you moving out, the charter school moves in and provides that educational environment that you are looking for. That should be the goal every single time. These ideas that we should force housing and urban development to make every suburban area also a low-income area with Section 8 housing, or ram a whole bunch of apartment buildings into single-family neighborhoods, that's idiocy. And it doesn't have results. We've tried busing. We've tried all of these social experimentation. It doesn't work. And I'm speaking as someone, we live in the suburbs in an area that has no apartments. There are no apartments in the town that I live in. Trying to force some apartments in here will only cause not just quote unquote white flight, but the blacks who live here too will just up and move, because people want to live where they want to live. So instead of trying to destroy a successful model like charter schools, we should be supporting them and spreading them wherever the need exists. Again, no utopias. We'll never find them. But solutions can create and improve better environments for the social ills that we're experiencing. Yeah. Okay, that's the show for today. I'm Stacy Washington, and this is American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.